CHAZ Hypocrisy and the Dumbest Bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is Garrick Ross. Welcome, Garrick.
Can we go to CHAZ?
Yes.
That'd be a fun Mark and the Millennials field trip.
Field trip.
Let's go to CHAZ.
Let's make a field trip to CHAZ. And of course, joining us is Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and Adam Couture, our producer. So this episode is called CHAZ Hypocrisy. They are a bunch of hypocrites already. Didn't take very long. And you're right, we should do a trip to CHAZ. I'm not sure if they'd really want to let us in.
Oh, they would not like us there, Mark.
Well, I mean, they might let us in just to have a little bit of a conversation with them, you know.
No.
Probably not.
No.
Well, because they're
I
so
don't think
open-minded, right? They're so open-minded. They probably have to
very
negotiate.
Very tolerant, very open-minded.
They're not open to press?
All for robust debates.
So what you're saying is CHAZ doesn't have free press.
You know?
I'm guessing they don't.
I have no idea what's going on in that
Press
place.
is free, provided that they agree with everything that you say.
You got to check in with the warlord first.
Exactly. Right. I thought it was supposed to be a flat society with no one in charge. However, so the Republic of CHAZ podcast listeners begins a talk about reparations. White participants are pressured to give blacks who are residents of CHAZ $10 each.
$10.
So the white citizens of CHAZ are supposed to give the black citizens of CHAZ $10. And there is, I guess, a temporary warlord who gets up and says, that's what we need you to do. We have a clip on this. You have to listen to this to believe it. This is one of the things that they think is really important. $10, by the way. Here is the clip.
I want you to find by the time you leave this autonomous zone, I want you to give $10 to one African American person from this autonomous zone.
One guy is very excited.
Wow.
And if you find that's difficult,
Only $10?
If you find it's hard for you to give $10 to people of color, to black people especially, you have to think really critically about in the future, are you going to actually give up power and land and capital when you have it? If you have a hard time giving up $10, you got to think about, are you really down with this struggle? Are you really down with the movement? Because if that is a challenge for you, then I'm unsure if you're in the right place. So find an African American person. The white people, I see you. I see every single one of you. And I remember your faces. You find that African American person and you give them $10. Cash App, Venmo, $10 in your pocket. That's my challenge to you. Do it.
$10. And somebody, of course, on Twitter posted this and said, hello, Mom, can you loan me $10? I'm in the chat zone and I don't have any cash, you know? Probably because they're not working. I'm just guessing.
In the midst of the global pandemic here, money is a little tight for some people.
Well, money is particularly tight for the residents of CHAZ because we know they're not working.
And
there's no economy. They're not working.
Yes, except for the businesses that happen to have.
So how are they affording to live there if they're not working? How are they affording to eat? How are they affording to do anything?
Well, they are relying on donations of supplies and they're sleeping in, I believe, tents. It is.
So they're relying on donate. So at some point, the free food that's being donated to them, and the free bottled water, and the free porta potties, and so forth,
which the city provided.
That's going to. At some point, it's going to run out. Okay, certainly the food is.
Well, they had an incident. You know, I've been following this on Twitter because I think this is the most amusing part of the protests to this point. Was apparently they invited in some homeless individuals from the city's homeless population and offered them food, and then they took all the food, and they didn't have any, so the
homeless people took all the food.
So they went to Twitter and were like, "We need donations of like vegan, products and GMO-free stuff." And I was like, "Wow, this is about as stereotypical as it gets."
They actually want the kind of food that they want. It's not good enough with having donations. They actually want, GMO-free food,
vegan,
and tofu,
organic, and all the whole lot of it.
So I also saw a picture of the CHAZ garden. The CHAZ garden was like a 20 by 20 plot, and it had tomato plants, like 3 or 4 tomato plants, like a couple of pepper plants, a couple of flowers, and so forth. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, it's going to take months before
Mark.
that starts producing, and even then, if you're lucky,
That's
it'll feed
not a
one
lot.
person.
That is not a lot. I was like, these people should look at what kind of a size farm it takes to sustain a major city. Ergo, all of America's heartland.
Let alone, well, certainly America's heartland is feeding the entire world and could certainly feed the entire world if necessary. But these individuals are like, no, we're going to be self-sufficient.
In the middle of an urban
Yes. So
place.
they plant a garden and they're like 3 or 4 tomato plants, 2 pepper plants, a couple of flowers which you can't eat, and
I had respect for the.
apparently that's going to be.
I had like a modicum of respect for the people, like the hippies in the 60s and 70s who did their little communes out in the woods, and they had like 10 people, and they were all making food and whatever and living off the land, and I thought that was cool and all, but now you got like 3 blocks of Seattle, Washington that's effectively like communized.
Well, the '60s revolution was as much about free love and sex and all that stuff as it was anything else.
Yeah, I just mean from
and it was
like
also
the
anti-Vietnam.
operational. I mean,
it's also
the
very
operation-
anti-Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, a lot
that
of
was
those draft
what coalesced
dodgers.
those people.
Yeah.
And drugs, no doubt about that. However,
LSD.
these people clearly it's drugs, but it's also the hatred of the United States of America, and the 1619 Project, right?
That's very interesting.
I mean, they're talking about that.
Yeah.
What is that? Define that.
So the New York Times has a project run through a couple of, I don't know if they're historians or who they are, because there's people in academia, and especially history academia, who
That say the original sin of the
discount
United States.
a lot of the theses of the 1619 Project, which is that America didn't start in 1776. It actually started in 1619 when the first slaves came to the United States, and that the United States is not an inherently good country. It is actually a lineage of racism, and it in itself is a bad construct based on this principle.
Sure.
And it is
So the United States is failed at the very beginning because of
it is
slavery.
a failed origin.
So therefore,
it is history of
it should be
failures.
canceled.
Yeah,
It should be part of the cancel culture. Let's cancel the United States, and in its place,
and it
put
makes
what?
a lot of historical
Put CHAZ?
claims with CHAZ. Who knows what else? Because this is always the interesting.
Well, according to
debacle
CHAZ,
with these
$10 is
conversations.
sufficient. $10 in reparations. That's
I
good
thought
enough
it
in
was funny.
CHAZ.
If you're listening to the clip, they act like $10 is indicative of your ability to, in the future, give away your property, land, and power.
He did say that,
and
didn't
he?
he?
Said that, and that kind of took me back a little bit, because I was like, oh, so this is, effectively, a test of
That's Marxist,
how
by the way.
devoted you are to the cause.
So let me
and
ask you
that-
something. He did say that. That's classic Marxism, what he said, which is, and be prepared. Are you ready to give away your property? And it's like, okay, well, let's just start from the beginning. If you accumulate stuff because you work hard, and then these idiots in CHAZ say, now you must give that stuff away, why would anyone work? That is what caused Marxism, Leninism to fail. Because Marx said that in
Even
perfect
Maoism.
communism and socialism, each person will work according to their ability and take according to their need. The problem is why would you work at all if you can't own anything, and that everything that you work for is automatically given away to someone else who probably isn't working?
Yeah.
And these idiots still haven't figured that out.
There's a lot of examples of this. I mean, look at, near the collapse of the Soviet Union, the most notable thing that was in the news was how the Soviets had run out of food. I mean, the biggest obstacle in westernizing Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union was getting food there. We had to actually airlift in.
The Soviet Union could never feed themselves.
Could
In
never
fact,
feed themselves.
all throughout their history, the Soviet Union, that is, and
That's why they relied on the Soviet ag states
they had
to
lines
do it for them.
They
yeah.
had lines. So they actually had lines for bread, for something so basic as bread, and because there was a limit of how much bread
They
you
could
could
produce.
you could take.
Yep.
But wait a minute, think about that. There was a limit to how much bread you could take or buy in the Soviet Union. Well, isn't that completely antithetical to Marxism? Because Marxism said there would be
There'd be
so
an
much,
abundance,
it would be such an
and
abundance.
everybody would have what they would need. I mean, and this has
wouldn't have to work
drastic
for it.
consequences. And if you want to look at like how bad it can
So
get,
why doesn't CHAZ relocate inside of Cuba where you have Marxism, and basically it's Marxism-Leninism because that's how it was created, or Marxism-Stalinism, all the same. And you can go to Cuba, you can create your perfect society, your utopia.
Because people aren't serious actors. They want to talk the good fight.
Well, maybe because mom and
message.
dad aren't there. They can't call up mom and dad and say, hey, we're really hungry. We know we're not working. We know that we were living in your basement before we started living CHAZ, but now we need
Mark, it is so easy for people to say that they're going to do these things and live that life, but when it comes time to actually do it, the realized trade-offs are never enough to incentivize people to do this, because people always realized, as much as we loathe capitalism for our own personal misfortune,
Here's my proposal. My proposal is, in CHAZ, let's say there are 1,000 people that live in CHAZ, CHAZites. Let's send those 1,000...
Is that what we're settling on, what people from CHAZ are called? CHAZites? Chazians?
Let's send the Chazians to Cuba, and let's have a swap. So the Cubans, let's take 1,000 people from Cuba who will come to the United States of America and immediately create opportunity for themselves, because they're going to be so happy they're in a free society. And they're going to be reunited with their families and probably relocate wherever they want to relocate, maybe South Florida, potentially, right? But that doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is they're going to be so thrilled to be in this country, to have an opportunity at a better life. And let's send those Chazians to Cuba, and they can create their utopia under the Marxist umbrella that has been created in Cuba. Let's see how that works out.
Some of the most staunch conservative principles, people for personal freedom and the absence of the state in their daily lives, would be a lot of these Cuban refugees who come to the United States and came over here in the heart of the
Castro regime.
The Castro regime.
Sure, they came by boat.
Because
in some cases
sometimes they came on a raft that they or a tire that they floated on over here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's
shark-infested waters and made it across.
Sometimes, my sister is personally.
That's when you're desperate, by the way.
Yeah.
When you actually are willing to put your life at risk. In fact, knowing that the chances of you not making it are greater than making it from Cuba to Miami.
Oh yeah.
If the fact that you want to do that,
the regime,
that's when you know that the lifestyle there is so awful. But according to the Chazians, Marxism is great. Give up your land when you accumulate it. Give it up.
Did you see their list of demands? They published an article on Medium where they.
I started reading it. Go over some of them. Let's hear it.
It is the.
Is it a list of millennial demands?
It is.
By the way,
it certainly surpasses even your most cliche.
Wait a minute, is it a list of millennial demands?
I don't know if it's millennial demands, Mark, but it's a list of out there.
Y'all want a lot of stuff.
Oh, I don't want a lot of stuff. I only want one thing, and that is people to leave me alone.
So what are some
of the demands off the top of my head? It's been a week since I've read this thing. So the first and foremost thing is they want the total abolition of police force.
Okay.
Including getting rid of all of the pensions of existing police officers. They want reparations in an amount of money to be determined. Or
they just said $10.
Well, in that clip, yeah.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
They were like,
so
to
that's
be
already
determined.
That's already not true. Okay.
To be determined on reparations.
They want to dismantle the Seattle Police Department, because I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
They want to demand a retrial of all people of color currently serving in prison and sentenced for a violent crime. Jeez. I thought most of those people were let out anyway, black, white, whatever, during COVID, because they were, apparently being quarantined is the least safe if you're in prison, but it's the most safe if you're staying at home. So go ahead. What else?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. You got the list up, Mark. Tell me what else.
No, I want to see what else. So we demand the abolition of imprisonment. So you can't put bad people in prison.
One was expunging all marijuana-related crimes from the record.
That's kind of happening nationwide anyway. So
yeah.
On a state-by-state basis. We demand autonomy. But by the way, if you're going to create a new country, and one of the basic principles of that country is marijuana good. That's what, we're about marijuana. It tells you automatically about the idiots that are running the place.
One of the things
because I got to tell you something. As a child of the 1970s who matured, went to middle school and high school in the 1970s, as a boomer, I will tell you that everybody I know that did pot in high school and continued, emphasis on continued thereafter, well into their 20s, into their 30s, into their 40s, all of those people are either dead or have serious neurological problems. And I don't care what anyone says. If you do it for a long enough time and you smoke for a long enough time, something's going to happen to you. Go.
You know, marijuana, my generation, we could have a whole debate about it. I think just naturally my generation doesn't care. I don't think you should be put in prison for smoking a plant, regardless of whether it has irreparable harm to your personal well-being. I think that's your
pot's
choice.
already being decrimmed nationwide.
Yes, yeah, that's fine.
It's
Yeah.
already happening,
Yeah,
so they're already behind the 8 ball, you know?
Yeah, one of the other things that I saw is
I think what they're really demanding is they want to be given pot on a daily basis because most of them are stoners, you know, and that's why they're living in the pot. That's why they can't get motivated to get out of mom and dad's basement, you know.
Oh, millennials, huh?
Follow the Doritos, okay?
You know,
you're out in the basement. Quick, honey, lock the door.
There is some other reasons for the whole mom, you know, the debate, the basement living and dwelling, but you know, it's okay.
We demand justice for those who have been sexually harassed or abused by the Seattle Police Department. That's one of their demands.
Yeah.
So, okay.
The other one was they wanted not just the abolition of the police department, but the associated criminal justice systems. They wanted to get rid of the courts.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we have economic demands as well. We demand the de-gentrification of Seattle, starting with rent control.
Oh, boy.
So that means, by definition,
The state controls the price.
you are going to give away your property. That's what de-gentrification means. It means that if you have 20 buildings in downtown Seattle,
if you came in,
which are really nice buildings,
and repaired and remodeled,
you're going to give up your apartment.
Yeah.
You're going to give up your house. You're going to give up whatever you've worked for your entire life.
Yeah, you know, you made money and you invested in local Seattle and renovated
We demand the
neighborhoods.
restoration of city funding for arts and culture. You know who has traditionally supported the arts in America? Large local-based and small local-based companies, because those companies live there, those people live there that work there, and they want arts.
Yeah.
And therefore, they support the arts. But as the money has left the cities, so has the support for the arts, because the arts, by definition, are supposed to be supported by generous contributions from the community. If the community determines it's no longer something that they want to do, it's probably because the city isn't worth living in anymore. That's usually what's happened, and we have the same problem in our hometown where the Baltimore City Orchestra continues to lose money, but the reason they continue to lose money is because one,
tax base is
people are
fleeing.
afraid to go there because it's not safe in the area that they're located. And you're right, Garrick, the tax base has evaporated. Why has the tax base evaporated? Because the idiots, the idiots, the blue state idiots who run those cities have run them into the ground. So people have left.
And it's funny because, you know, you talk about the people who are running these cities and how they respond to these things. When it comes to CHAZ, the mayor of Seattle has pulled all the police out of there, and she is negotiating with them. I don't know what the compromise is going to be.
She's the first diplomat for the city of Seattle.
Yeah, she's the U.S. envoy to CHAZ. She's got a great title.
They also demand free college for the people of the state of Washington due to the overwhelming effect that education has.
Housing is a right, not a privilege.
Yeah, there we go. We demand that between now and the abolition of the SPD, which is the Seattle Police Department, the Seattle Police be prohibited from performing homeless sweeps that displace and disturb our homeless neighbors. Folks, a lot of that has to do with actually being very humane. Because if it's really cold out at nighttime, certain nights, or if it's raining really hard, these things can cause death, they can cause disease. So really, these are actually good things because, you know, maybe we should have more mental health services.
It's also a sanitary,
I actually agree with
it's also a sanitary issue in terms of public health.
Sure.
You know, you don't want a congregation of people without facilities to maintain them, you know, septic systems, you know, for the inevitable issue that people always joke about San Francisco with like feces and needles and things like that in the streets. You know, a lot of this is very true of when you know a lot of homeless people congregate in one area, it tends to lead to adverse health outcomes.
Oh, so get this. Finally, let us address our demands regarding the education system in the city of Seattle and Washington. We demand that the history of Black and Native Americans be given a significantly greater focus in the Washington State education curriculum. We demand that through anti-bias training become a legal requirement for all jobs in the education system, as well as the medical profession and in the mass media. We demand that the city of Seattle and the state of Washington remove any and all monuments dedicated to historical figures of the Confederacy whose treasonous attempts to keep America with slavery as a permanent
Does
fixture
Seattle,
were in
Washington
affront.
have slaveholder like not slaveholders. Do they have Confederate statues in Seattle?
So look. Obviously, change occurs person by person. So here's what I would demand of the CHAZ participants. I would say, if you really want to help someone who is in the black community, why don't you pay for their private school tuition so that you can get them the heck out of the really crappy public school system in Seattle, just like every other blue city in America where the school system is awful. Public school system, by the way. You know, the way forward is so obvious, but these folks aren't interested in it. So meanwhile, the cancel culture, of course, wants to also cancel the show Cops.
Oh man, my favorite pastime.
So the Cops is a show. It's a real-time...
They just follow cops around. Well, cops do cop things.
And with cameras.
Half the time it's like people being idiots, and half the time it's like some crime going on where there's a high-speed chase, and then like a third of the time it's them just hanging out with the local population. And
you know what's fascinating is you have an opportunity to see police officers...
There are 370 million interactions a year between officers and the public.
You see these police officers in real time.
Doing...
And
normal everyday stuff.
You see how dangerous, you see how at any moment, at any given day as a police officer, your life could be ended.
Yeah.
By some idiot.
It shows you the wide swath of how a police officer's daily routine is. You know, sometimes things go off the hook and they're in a high-speed police pursuit, and then the rest of their days they're just chatting with the people on the boardwalk or wherever they are.
But these people want to get rid of the police department. They want to get rid of, the military, and they want to get rid of security guards. They just want to get rid of all that stuff. But meanwhile, if you actually took the time to watch the show Cops, you would have an opportunity to see all the good the police officers do in keeping dangerous people off the streets. Look, we had a family in Calvert County, Maryland, who had a relative who lost his life, as I recall, from a drunk driver. In other words, this person was murdered by a drunk driver.
Yes.
And so, according to the CHAZ folks, you know what? You don't need police because you don't need to take those people off the street who are driving drunk and killing people. That's not necessary. When you start talking pragmatic and practical reasons for getting rid of the police, everything falls apart. Nothing works.
Yeah.
And then Paw Patrol was canceled.
Paw Patrol.
Explain what Paw Patrol is.
It is like your most innocent childhood TV show.
It's animated.
It's an animated little TV show for little kids to watch and learn and, have something aimless to watch on TV. And it's got a little German Shepherd police dog in there, and he's, a nice, good cop, and he does, traffic duty and all the lot like that.
And is he nice? The police officer and
is
the
painted
dog?
in a good light, and that is problematic for children, apparently.
So did you watch Paw Patrol?
No, it was way after my time.
Afterwards, okay. So it's not a millennial thing, it's a new thing.
It's a new thing.
So part of the cancel culture is cancel cops because it has...
Cancel live PD, which is a very upscale version of
it shows real police in real situations, real time.
Yes.
And then Paw Patrol, same thing.
Because it glorifies police somehow.
Exactly.
I don't understand.
And what's interesting too is, and I have a story about my county. My county actually was on Live PD, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
That was the program. But it wasn't on Cops. It was Live PD, and there was a call in my county, and the sheriff's department answered the call, and they showed up, and the call was about a dog, and the dog was attacking a child. That was the call. And the dog was a pit bull breed, which obviously, without going after the breed, because I'm not going to do that, this particular pit bull was obviously ferocious.
Yeah.
So we'll just speak to this particular pit bull.
Yep.
And this pit bull was mauling an infant.
Oof.
And so they had the police there respond. They had the Live PD, all of the cameras and lights were there, of course, because it's real time.
Yeah.
And they had to cut the feed because it was so awful.
Graphic.
The child had been killed by the dog.
Jeez.
And so later on, the police investigated, obviously. It's like, okay, first let's get this child in an ambulance and medevac the child to see if we can save the child's life, which did not unfortunately happen. And then second,
That's so tragic.
Second, let's find out how this happened, right? And as it turned out, the family had left the child alone with a dog that they knew was a violent and dangerous dog.
So, it was negligence.
And so, And so here's the thing. If you're a police officer, these are the kinds of things that probably are going to affect you for the rest of your life because you deal with these things on a daily basis.
I see a lot of terrible things.
And these people, these CHAZ people and these idiots in the United States of America who think that you should defund and abolish the police don't understand the real life situations that these police officers have to go through and see on a daily basis. I mean, they probably need mental health resources, the police officers do, just to get through a regular week or 2 weeks or years worth of work because of the stuff they see. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you touched on a good point. I think mental health is something that this generation of, people of various age, I don't mean like one generation over the other, I just mean like this time in history is something that we are more open to dealing with and talking about compared to historical other times. I think it's important that, when it comes to discussing, police reform, which a lot of Americans do agree that in some capacity we need with respect to, brutality and things, it's also important to address the people who do the policing, because like you said, a lot of them do experience a lot of tragedy, and they see a lot of very dark and bad things, and it's, having a mentally healthy police force, I think, is one step in achieving the reform that people are looking for, because you're providing them an outlet to heal.
So let me ask you something.
As well.
Without a police force, we wouldn't have been able to respond to that household where this particular child had been killed by a dog, right?
Yeah.
And we also wouldn't have an opportunity to charge the parents. We also wouldn't have an opportunity to be able to have those parents should have a record, and quite frankly should never have another child, or should never be allowed to, adopt a child or to have a child. And my point here is, without that system in place, these kinds of crimes are going to be repeated on innocent lives. And I just got to tell you, I don't know what these folks at CHAZ are thinking or what these anarchists are thinking, but they're so wrong about everything.
Yeah. At least I'm encouraged that not many national political figures are embracing this call for, getting rid of the police totally. You saw
Democrats are. They're afraid to even speak up. Even so-called moderate Democrats are afraid to actually say, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Well, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus came out and said, no, absolutely not are we defunding the police.
And who was that?
She is from California. I don't particularly recall her name. Same with James Clyburn from South Carolina. He's the majority whip now. He's former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
But the radical part of the party, let's face it.
But like I'm saying, at least it's not the main.
Ilhan Omar,
80%, Ilhan
AOC,
Omar. Yes, they'll
Rashida
go
Tlaib.
for it, of course. But I'm encouraged that 80% of the police are one of those institutions that people, regardless of what your opinion is on the occurrences in the news for the last couple of weeks, is still very popular. People think that generally police do a good job, and they do for the most part a good job, and 80% of Americans agree with this assessment, and I am encouraged that it is simply just look, that part of the party that we like to talk about will always say things that just don't make sense because they have an agenda outside of progressing America.
So here's my thing. Why is it then, if it's such a small group of people, then why is it that the blue city mayors told their police to stand down?
Because
while stores were being looted,
that's where people are elected.
And lives were being ruined.
Because that's where people are elected.
But those are Democrats.
Yeah, and that they have to be accountable.
So it doesn't matter whether the Democrats say, or some Democrats say, oh no, I don't want to defund the police. The fact of the matter is, they de facto defunded the police all those nights when the looting occurred because they told the police to stand down.
And that is wrong. That is an issue where local representatives should have a reckoning.
Those looters ruined the lives of the small business people that spent their entire lives building those small businesses.
And these cities should have a reckoning with these local mayors.
Yes,
and they absolutely should.
I can only hope that people will start going to the polls and say, you know what, I'm not going to vote for the Democrat or the Republican. I'm going to vote for the best person who's going to use common sense to bring our city back.
Yeah.
So get this, podcast listeners. Wall Street Journal has an editorial page, and they have on it the Seattle Secessionists. And they talk about the Seattle Secessionists. And the first order of CHAZ, the first business, was to erect a wall with
Build
armed
the
guards.
wall, Mark.
They have armed guards, and because you have the right to carry there, and they want to build a wall. They did build a wall, and to prevent unlawful entry of non-CHAZ combatants. So the article article goes on. It says, as a cardboard sign at the border of the CHAZ warns, "You are now leaving the USA." Seattle residents report that they have been subjected to barricades set up by the protesters. Assistant Chief Deanna Nolet said on Wednesday, with some armed individuals running them as checkpoints into the CHAZ neighborhood. Open carry is legal in Washington state. That's why they have, of course, weapons. CHAZites have also set up medic stations and a no-cop co-op to distribute snacks. They sound like children.
Distribute snacks. Come get your Fritos and orange slices.
Hey, Mom, there's snacks. That's why I joined CHAZ. And there were rumors of a rudimentary system of taxation, reports of citizens and businesses being asked to pay a fee to operate within this area.
The American dream is so ingrained into people that even when trying to establish a commune, they basically just reformed American democracy.
And so she added that police were interested in a dialogue with the foreign ministers of CHAZ, if any could be contacted. There is a whole citywide effort at this point, Ms. Nolet said, to try to identify who the leaders are. At a gathering of CHAZites Wednesday, there was talk of perhaps forming governance. In a leaderless movement, there has to be people stepping up to the leaders, argued a protester identified as Rel, per the Seattle Times. That night, a crowd enjoyed a funk rap concert by the band Martial Law.
Martial Law. What a nice band name right there.
So on Thursday, CHAZ has established that universal symbol of statehood, a website. It explains itself as an emerging community based on mutual aid, yet one with an ugly history. Although we have liberated free Capitol Hill in the name of the people of Seattle, we must not forget that we stand on land already once stolen by the Duwamish people. I'm assuming those are Native Americans. So, this is so millennial. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm reading from the millennial Bible and from the crazy people that educated you in the public school system.
Mark, this is incredible. So they make this movement, right? So to recap in too long didn't read terms here, is they took over a section of the city with the goal of getting rid of government, money, taxes, and a police force, and immediately set up money, a government, taxes, and a police force.
There's a list of demands which run from free college, which we talked about already, to de-gentrification of Seattle. President Trump denounced all this in his tweets, but for once, he should let it speak for itself. The good progressives of Washington allowed the CHAZ to rise, and now they can decide whether to invade the enclave or let it become a new republic if they can keep it. The Seattleites...
They can have a republic if they can keep it. Oh, man.
So this reminds me, Garrick, this is where we're going with this. This reminds me of the South Park episode where, the anarchists create their own society. South Park just called this.
Oh, they're way ahead of the time.
Even Ted Cruz retweeted or tweeted originally this particular clip that we're about to show you. And it's South Park talking about anarchism and why they're so much more woke than everybody else, talking to the kids of South Park. We have this clip, and here it is.
Proving we don't need corporations. We don't need money. This can become a commune where everyone just helps each other.
Yeah, dude.
We'll have one guy who makes bread, and one guy who he looks out for other people's safety.
You mean like a baker and a cop?
No, can't you imagine a place where people live together and provide services for each other in exchange for their services?
Yeah, a town.
Yeah, it's called a town.
You kids just haven't been to college yet. But just you wait. This thing is about to get huge.
This CHAZ thing is just going to get huge because you didn't go to college. You just don't know, man.
So really, you're just making a town. Oh, wow.
You're supplanting one town with another, except that you're trying to use your political favor to go and take the property of others because you don't want to work for it.
Except you're messing with the
So
US
millennial.
of A, baby. It's time for the CIA to go in and institute a coup and turn the moderates of CHAZ in favor with reintegration with the United States. That's how we're doing it, Mark. We're going full CIA on them.
So didn't the Babylon Bee have an article in this too? It was really funny. Something like along the lines of what President Trump did. Trump decided to not have negotiations with CHAZ, and then
He's pulled out of the summit. We're drawing a hard line in the dirt when it comes to CHAZ.
hard line in the sand.
Trust but verify.
So on the so we have to talk about this. On the Daily Show, Biden says, Vice President Biden, former Vice President Biden says that his greatest concern is that the President of the United States, President Trump, is going to try to steal the election.
How do you steal an election?
Can you imagine?
I just don't understand the phrasing. It's
I mean,
how's he going to steal an election? People go to the ballot box, they vote, and the outcome is pretty standard.
Exactly. And he further goes on to say that, we would have to get the military to remove Trump from the White House after he steals the election. Do you realize how dangerous this kind of talk is? It is so dangerous to implant this idea in people's minds. We already have these morons who have gone throughout the country and looted. I'm not talking about the protesters, I'm talking about the looters and the thugs who have killed police officers and injured and maimed small business people. But the fact of the matter is that we already have those people that are already lit up to do more.
Yep.
And then we have Vice President Biden saying something to The Daily Show.
That he's not going to leave.
He's not going to leave, and he's going to cheat in order to be able to stay. We have a clip on this. And here is the clip.
It's my greatest concern, my single greatest concern. This president's going to try to steal this election. This is a guy who said that all mail-in ballots are fraudulent, voting by mail, while he sits behind the desk in the Oval Office and writes his mail-in ballot to vote in the primary.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? He's basically, first of all, there have been problems throughout the country with the primary ballots because they were mail-in ballots all over the country. I mean, and by the way, this is with Democrats as well, saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this."
Horrendous outcomes. I mean, let's talk about here in Maryland. I mean, we got ballots that were supposed to be for South Carolina, and South Carolina got our ballots, and then
a completely different state.
A whole region got strictly Spanish ballots, even though they're supposed to get English ballots, and then they've had issues counting the ones for like an entire city council district in Baltimore City because they were printed wrong and they don't match up with the computer, and it's just been a whole nightmare. We had a primary a couple weeks ago, and there's still people in Baltimore City who don't know who their elected official is going to be.
So this is a great point. So isn't it interesting that Biden's talking about Trump is going to steal the election because he doesn't want mail-in ballots, which are notoriously used
unreliable
for stealing elections, including ballot harvesting, which is legal in California, but absolutely positively should be illegal nationwide for all the obvious reasons that we've talked about before. But meanwhile, we have Trump. We have Trump who has said nothing along these lines, but we have Biden on the other hand who's saying, just like Stacey Abrams, she said that she didn't lose the election. The election was stolen from her. Hillary Clinton
lost by 4 points.
Hillary Clinton said that she didn't lose the election.
Go to Wisconsin.
And so now we have him, he's basically laying the same foundation that was laid by Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams.
I mean, it's the
so
standard.
dangerous.
It's the standard playbook, though. It's, quote, blank person is going to be terrible. I lost because it was stolen from me, and then I am going to lose, and then that person is just bad. Like, it's so standard. Like, there's no, I don't know.
Do you think people see that, though?
Yeah, I think it falls on deaf ears. I think, sure, it may galvanize a small portion of your base that's like, yeah, this person's going to stay in the White House.
Do you think that's what this is about? This is about getting people to show up at the polls because he's saying, well, Trump's going to steal the election, so therefore you must get out and vote because he's going to try to steal it.
Is he? Yeah, probably riling up the base, I guess. I don't. To me, it's stupid. I don't think people are gonna vote because they're worried that Trump's gonna leave the White House or not or whatever. I think that truly this is going to be a referendum on either one candidate or the other. You know, is this going to be a referendum on Trump or is it going to be a referendum on Biden? And then people are going to make their opinion and then they're going to go to the polls and vote. And, you know, I hope things go smoothly. I hope that the states that have some kind of a mail-in system on top of an in-person system are able to manage both of those things effectively. But this talk that, like, this election is going to be stolen and that it's going to be, you know, this big boondoggle, to me is just disingenuous and also kind of dangerous, because you probably, I think, disenfranchise people more when you keep going around and saying, yeah, your vote's not going to matter, it's going to be stolen, yada, yada, and they're going to be like, well, why vote?
They're also projecting, because he's saying, well, the military will have to escort Trump out of the White House. Isn't it the FBI and the Democrats who have spent 3 whole years trying to escort Trump out of the White House through phony investigations and through phony claims and phony charges? And then we have the Democrat who's projecting, the Democrat candidate Joe Biden, who's saying, well, you know, once again, we got to get him out of there because he's going to try to steal the election, just like he did last time.
You know, one of the greatest features of our democracy is that exchange of power. You know, that one sitting leader gets up and, you know, walks out and spends the day with the other one, and they go about their separate ways, and the new one takes over. And there's no part of me that would believe that anything that this president would do would be any different than that. And I think it's cynical, and I don't think it's fair.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
In the light of the riots and the looting and so forth and the deaths, this is actually super dangerous language.
Regardless of whether you like the president or not, you know, if you're a supporter or you're against him, it is disingenuous, and I think it is, like you said, kind of a dangerous talking point to be running around saying wildly.
Yes. Amen. So get this, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest porch pirate in America.
The dumbest porch pirate in America.
Get this, a porch pirate is, go ahead, Garrick, what is a porch pirate?
Somebody who runs up and steals your packages.
So in the age of COVID, right, everybody's ordering more online than they've ever
Amazon.
ordered before. More than they've ever ordered. So then that package gets delivered by FedEx, UPS, RPS, USPS, whomever. It gets dropped off right in front of your door. And people know it. People know it. So, and they have no idea what you actually ordered, but they want it. So they walk by your house, they drive by your house, and they steal it.
Twitter posts some funny
That's a porch
ones.
pirate.
Yeah, Twitter posts some funny pictures where or screenshots. So they'll be like, you know, they'll show a picture of their Ring doorbell cam, and then they'll be like, what the package actually was. And sometimes it's like people stealing packages off, and it's like, well, have fun with your pretty pink rainbow princess little canopy. Like, I don't know what you're gonna do with that, but good luck.
So this porch pirate is the dumbest pirate in America, because he decided to walk by after he saw a package delivered. He walks by, he's walking a dog, and he's wearing a t-shirt. He's got the dog in tow, and he sees, wow, it appears that no one is home. It appears that there's clearly a package that was just delivered there. So, he walks by, and then what does he do? He decides to cover his face with his t-shirt, but then walks by with his face covered with a t-shirt, but is still walking the same dog.
Jeez, I wonder who owns that dog on this block. Chet, we'll come home, look at your neighbor, and, well, you know, Chet, that looks oddly similar to your dog that happened to be with the guy who stole my package today. You know, dead giveaway.
Right, the dog walked by with the same guy, and then walked by with the guy, but this time, same clothes, same dog, but covered his face.
Honestly, you're better off leaving your face open, and obviously the dog's more recognizable.
No doubt in my mind.
Stupid.
We have this clip. There's no talking, of course, because we have to watch the guy as he walks by twice, and the second time takes the package. And here is the clip. So here he is. He walks by with the dog because he sees the package. The Ring doorbell's there, of course. It's giving, and then now he's grabbing the package because he covered his face, but he's still got the dog in tow. So I can't believe it. I mean, it's just unbelievable. What an idiot. So that is the dumbest porch pirate in America. And by the way, porch piracy has become, as we talked about before, it's a huge thing now.
It's the crime of the future, Mark.
It really is. I mean, you could literally, if you had a van, you could probably drive through any neighborhood in America.
And steal Amazon packages.
But for COVID, if these people were all working, you know, they had to commute to if you went to a neighborhood where everybody still had to commute to their jobs because COVID didn't exist or COVID was over, you could steal a lot of stuff. Just saying.
Yeah, you know, it'd be, hey, opportunity for innovation out there? Any podcast listeners who want to come up with a product that would make it so it's harder to steal packages off a porch?
Very smart.
Store
It's
them
very
somewhere.
smart.
One of the cool things
It would have to be reusable too. Something that would be reusable.
every time they come, they drop their package.
Absolutely, because if you go to rob a bank, right? If you go to rob a bank and you say, "Hey, give me all your cash and hand it to me," the bank will put all the cash in a bag, and then there's green dye that blows up when you walk out of the bank.
Are you talking from experience?
It doesn't kill you. It's right. I did that once. It doesn't kill you, the green dye. It just blows up and you become green or
You're
red.
marked and they can find you.
And they know exactly what happened, right?
Yeah.
So
And
it's
it
too
renders
late.
all the money unusable.
But the problem is if you did that here, then of course the package would be destroyed. It would be all over the house, and so forth. Plus, I'm sure it would be way too expensive to implement something like that. But I agree with
a
you.
lot of apartment complexes.
It's an opportunity.
One of the things that they tout is they have package lockers, like Amazon lockers, where the mail person or FedEx or Amazon Prime or whoever does it comes and they put it in your little locker and call it a day. And they're not relatively that expensive. I'd imagine you could put one in your front yard. Wow, I'm coming up with a company off my top of my mind right now. Ooh.
Or just have
I'm
a
taking-
dog.
I'm taking
tie your
startup
dog to the
investors.
front door. The problem is that your dog, if it's really a well-trained dog, it's also going to bite the UPS guy when he puts the. So that's probably not going to work.
Or he's going to open up your package. The dog's going to just start.
Especially if you order
shredding it.
dog biscuits from what is it called? What is that? Barkley or something like that, or some dogs. Because my wife orders from one of these dog websites.
She's getting the organic, fine quality, top-notch dog biscuits.
Hopefully that guy steals that. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, this is not what I wanted.
Or if it's the guy with the dog, and maybe it was exactly what he wanted.
Could be. It's possible. So get this, podcast listeners. A speedway in North Carolina declares a race, a car race that is. He declares the car race, it's a protest. And that way he can skirt the coronavirus rules. So what he did was he was closed down because of coronavirus, the owner of a speedway.
Okay.
And he decided, you know what? If we call this a protest, then apparently everybody's allowed to commingle and get really close together. But if we just call it a race, a speedway race, cars racing against one another, well then we're probably not going to be able to open. So 2,000 people attend. And here's what it says. A North Carolina speedway drew a crowd of more than 2,000 spectators in defiance of the state's coronavirus restrictions after declaring the race a protest. The governor's
If you
office...
can't beat them, join them.
The governor's office warned Ace Speedway in Elon, North Carolina, earlier in the week that a crowd of more than 25 would violate the state's Phase 2 coronavirus restrictions. But the news outlets report that more than 2,000 people attended. A sign from management outside the Speedway said, "This event is held in peaceful protest of injustice and inequality everywhere." Because apparently you can loot throughout the country, but you can't have a race with 2,000 people. And so the governor really couldn't do anything about it because
And that,
I thought that
ladies
was pretty
and
smart.
gentlemen, is how you play the game. It doesn't get better tactically than that. I mean, they executed that to flawless perfection.
And the owner of the raceway said, we legitimately do believe that there are injustices and there's some racism, and we do, of course, also believe that there's some reform that should take place, and that's why we held the race.
And I think it's notable that this is, an owner of a racing company, has a raceway where typically people associate racing, especially in the South, as one of the last, I guess, I'm not gonna say bastions of racism, but like it's a place where there's a lot of,
Where's this?
This is in the South, but a lot of with the culture of racing, like NASCAR and things like that, there's a lot of people who have...
I got to tell you something. The communities in America that are the most segregated are the communities in the Northeast.
Oh, believe me, yeah, I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
I
just meant
this is
the
simply not
apathy.
true.
I meant
It's
the
simply
apathy
not
for
true.
the Confederate heritage and things. I mean, NASCAR just came out and they were like, yeah, we actually we banned the Confederate flag.
The one black United States senator who is a Republican, the one and only Republican United States senator, is from South Carolina.
Yes.
Let me tell you something. There is no way you're going to find a black United States senator from the Northeast, the Northeastern United States.
Cory Booker.
Cory Booker?
Yeah.
Cory Booker's a Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying Republican.
Oh, yeah, Republican.
Yeah. Because because Tim Scott from South Carolina, that's the thing.
Which is cool because he's writing.
And I know this because
the
I've
police-
traveled. I've
he's
done a lot
writing
of
the
traveling.
police reform bill.
Done a lot of traveling in the Northeast, just to let you know. And my traveling in the Northeast, the communities are so heavily segregated, you can't believe it. You can't believe it. And then you come south, and the more southern you get, the more you see communities that are a lot more integrated, and there's much more interaction between those communities. That's been my observation. But
I was just simply speaking to the industry of racing.
You're from New Jersey, so it's a classic Northeasterner, right?
What?
The Northeasterner is like, oh man, those dumb Southerners down there with
What
their
dumb
Confederate
Southerners? No.
Confederate flags, you know?
Oh, man.
They're not woke like us. Even though, meanwhile, you go back to your all-white community and your little white enclave.
My little white, I'm from the shore. It's like the blue collar, everybody mixes. Oh my goodness. Who's painting the broad brush now, Mark? Who's painting the broad brush now?
Oh, God, that was good. So next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. It's the dumbest bill in America. Do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Yep. Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is, it's going to be an interesting one, reparations, a reparations task force. This is interesting, especially for millennials. So the dumbest bill in America is a task force for reparations. It was introduced by California Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, Democrat from San Diego. And Shirley Weber decided to put this bill in. It has passed the lower house in the state of California, has not passed the state Senate, and of course would also require Gavin Newman's signature. So the task force is just that. It would study the issue of reparations.
Oh,
and
it's a study bill.
Well, it's a task force bill, so it would be a task force
study. Yeah.
But the task force would provide recommendations on how to equalize things. And I want your thoughts on this as millennials, because this is what you guys were taught.
Do you want? So I have two separate perspectives here. I have the millennial, and I'll give you the millennial perspective. But I also have how I view these task forces. These are the king of we want to do something without actually doing anything. You know, they're like, we have this very big progressive bill, and it establishes a task force which looks into what would happen if we actually did the thing you want us to do. And then they get the recommendation, they give the recommendation, and then they never follow up with it. And it's just a way for them
100-page task force summary, and it eventually never gets implemented. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, usually for the most part, that's how task force bills. Until you get the one task force bill which turns into a couple $1 billion boondoggle that your state's stuck financing for 10 years.
Hint, hint. So what are your thoughts on this? What's the millennial perspective now?
You know, my perspective on reparations, millennials as a whole are a big fan of them, you know, in terms of righting what they perceive as the wrongs of, you know,
so CHAZ
history.
wants to give $10. They want white people to give every black person
that is the start,
in
though.
CHAZ
that
$10.
Is the start. That's the start of a broader conversation, as the gentleman indicated. You know, if you can't do 10 now, you're not going to be able to do land, property, and wealth later. So
what does that mean?
You know, the person from CHAZ is saying, you know, $10 now, and if you have a problem giving $10, how can we expect you to give property power?
So it's another bill that has no end in sight. There's no defined moment when you say there's equality. And see, this is where I come from a boomer standpoint, right? We should have, and we should always strive for more equality of opportunity at the starting gate of life.
Yeah.
At the starting gate of life, you want to give people the best opportunity that they can get and try to do your best to give them an equal opportunity, and that is education. Education. And the problem is that the blue state education systems in the blue state cities, the cities that are all governed by blue, for the most part, almost exclusively by blue woke mayors, have really bad public education systems, and they are blocking the idea of school choice. They won't let the money follow the student so you can get up and out. And that is the way you get up and out, through education. That's the first thing. And there also have to be other reforms too, which is, we've talked about this previously, 75% of black men do not stay around once they made a baby. They don't. And that is a fact. And so how do you equalize opportunity at the beginning of life if you have an entire generation, 75% of black young men and black young women who never knew their father or who never had a father figure? Go.
That's a lot to unpack. I think you make a lot of great points.
You're the one that talked about millennials think reparations are a good idea, but you give those reparations, you still don't have fathers in the homes. You still don't have true equality at the beginning of life with school choice. You don't have it because the public school systems run by the teachers' unions and run by the Democrats, and they're in cahoots with each other, don't educate children.
Yeah, I think you make great points about education. And it starts also not just with school choice. I also think, society should really seriously look at early childhood education as well. Getting people a good start, in pre-K and starting education a lot earlier than we do. By the time you're 5, you've got a lot of ingrained, capacity to learn, and it's about fostering that at an earlier age, regardless of who you are, where you live, and it also provides an outlet to start people earlier, gives them greater aptitude, and you see a lot of success stories in kids who do go to school earlier, and there is a disproportionate...
You also see a lot of success stories when parents read to their children at a very early age and continue to do so all throughout their grade school, pre-K to 5th grade. And you know what? That doesn't cost anything.
No.
That doesn't cost anything. That just, you know what that is? That costs time, and that's your job as a parent to do that.
Yeah.
Very few parents do it. And we have a first clip from Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, who put in this reparations task force bill. And here is the first of 2 clips. Here it is.
Further, the bill would require the task force to recommend, among other things, the appropriate mechanism for redress as it pertains to California's role in the enslavement of black people and their afterlives. It also requires them to disseminate that information in an educational format so California can understand its relationship.
So there you have it. So she's talking about, some of the lists of demands. And of course, my argument would be school choice, school choice, school choice. That, by the way, would cost a lot of money. I'm all for it. I think
the ends justifies the means. I mean, you're paying money up front, but I think your long-term investment, the dividends that we paid on it, is very important and good. And
before we're going to go on with this more, Garrick, but here is the second of 2 clips, the last clip of this podcast of this Assemblywoman in California, Ms. Weber. And here it is.
Black people make up 8% of California's population. However, 43% of the homeless population in California are black people. According to the 2018 report by the Public Policy Institute of California, African Americans males account for 28% of the state's male prison population, despite the fact that black men make up just 5.6% of the state adult males. A recent study conducted by California Legislative Analyst's Office states that by nearly every state measure, black K-12 students have the lowest performance of any racial ethnic group. Even as we debate the need for this study, COVID-19 has shed a sobering light on the culmination of these persistent disparities. Emerging data confirms that a disproportionate burden of illness and death due to COVID-19 fall on the black community.
So that actually is true about COVID, but this Assemblywoman is trying to say, well, even that is racist. So COVID isn't racist. COVID, of course, is about science, and we need to learn more about the science of who it attacks and why and how it happens and who's the most vulnerable. And we do know a lot, and we keep learning. But that has nothing to do with reparations. I mean, the issue here is, if you look, why is it that you have individuals who come from decent households in black families and white families, and you have these folks who are doing well all throughout life because there's a mother present, there's a father present, there's education in the home, there's reading in the home. They limit the amount of TV you can watch and say, hey, how about if you read this book? How about if you read this article? You know what? The solution isn't always about money. The solution is about the common sense of bringing the family back into the center of your life.
I have an interesting thought about when one of the things she talks about is the rate of incarceration, and I think that is one of the contributing factors to why, a lot of these families are the proverbial broken family. I also think a lot of these municipalities, these states, should look at how they view things, like what they make illegal. I think this society is too quick to make
Give an example.
so many
Give an
things
example.
illegal to a oomph degree. I mean, I think
You're talking about
easy
like
one-
marijuana.
The
Right?
easy one is like the easy example would be like the war on drugs
Okay.
and sentencing for certain drugs versus other ones, but also things like how bad. Well, but also you obviously have to have standards to enforce the law.
Yep.
You can't have people continuously committing theft and nothing happens to them. But also, you fail to pay a parking ticket and you're destitute, and now you're arrested and thrown in prison. I think that there's a line of how we should assess what is illegal.
I don't think you can be thrown into jail for not paying a parking ticket. I think more than likely what will happen is they'll put a boot on your car
Right.
and then tow your car to a lot, but that's not a criminal offense.
I don't.
That's a
I
civil
wasn't
offense.
I'm saying not that that's like the specific example I'm citing, but I'm saying generically things that
Life
you
is
would
hard.
view-
Life is hard, and government is making life harder, especially in these blue cities. I actually very much agree with that because I would never move to one of these blue cities and live in there as my permanent address. I just wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to put up with all the crap, the high taxes, the crime rate, and the fact that at any given time, the mayors of those cities might completely turn their back on you by saying, defund police.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that something as simple as school choice, and look, this California Assemblywoman, I can guarantee you, is bought and paid for by the teachers union because it's California, and there is no way that this individual who is black, Assemblywoman Shirley Weber, would ever want school choice, and that is the answer. Education is the answer. Just imagine if you don't have a father in the household, you could send your child to, your son, you could send your son to military school, right? Because he's out of control and he needs some sort of guidance, he needs some sort of discipline. You can't do it because you're a working mom and you're always working and you're not there either. There are solutions, right? And the solutions aren't easy solutions, but we got to go back to the basics of life, in my opinion.
The United States has solved a lot of its challenges in the world through the lens of education. What was the United States' immediate reaction to the issues of losing the space race, right? So the Russians sent Sputnik into outer space, and we think we just got punched in the throat. We instituted major educational reform to incentivize the field of STEM and provide better educational outcomes for children across the United States. And it has done so much wonders for the United States. Investing in education is good, but investing in education in the right way is even more fruitful.
And well said.
And allowing kids to specialize specialize their education in certain fields and ways that best suit them. One of my favorite I think it's Dr. Seuss stories is, they basically, or like quotes is they say, putting everybody in public schools, like sometimes you're teaching a monkey to fish. It's not what it's designed to do. It's Dr. Seuss. But, having kids that learn different ways.
You got to be careful on podcasts these days when you use the word monkey because, now I'm serious because there are a whole group of folks that even though that was in Dr. Seuss, which they might think that you're referring to someone of color, and we're not.
No, I'm just saying monkeys climb trees.
Make it very clear.
They don't fish.
By I mean him.
Yeah. Okay, I don't think anybody would have taken it that way, but all right.
Yeah, but no, I don't think they did either. But we're in cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
We're in this culture where if you just use any kind of language that can be taken the wrong way, that's where you are. And the thing is you sincerely, because you understand this because you do a lot of work in the legislature, you understand that there are some solutions are really easier than others, but we need to talk about this, probably a whole podcast to get the millennial perspective on this whole reparations thing, because it's interesting, because millennials actually, I do believe, think that this is something that has to happen.
That there is some kind of atonement that needs to be made
and my thought process is, as long as we keep having example after example of folks coming from India and from Pakistan and from all other parts of the world who come here with $2 in their pocket, and in that generation, they're already owning a small business and their kids are going to college. As long as we have that as an example, there is no excuse for the African American community to follow that same example, except for the fact that they're being, in my opinion, held back by the blue state mayors, the blue state governors, and in many cases, their own leadership that's telling them the reason you're not doing well is because, and it's not a zero-sum game, you're not doing well because that guy over there is doing well. That's not the way life works. You're not doing well because of what you're not doing. Final thoughts, and then we're going to go.
Your final thoughts are good enough for me.
And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. That's the dumbest bill in America. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our millennial, Garrick Ross. And of course, our producer, Adam Couture, and our assistant producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.